You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, The Sehlat Who Ate Its Tail. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook. We're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on X, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you. Brief reminder, this is the last week where we're going to have two Secrets of Star Trek episodes for you that we've caught up to Strange New Worlds. And so going forward, we'll just have one episode a week, and I know much to all of our loss. But it'll be good. So we're discussing the Sehlat Who Ate Its Tail. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happened in this one?
This week, the USS Farragut is scanning an uninhabited planet when a ship that looks like a giant evil metal teddy bear shows up. And despite the fact it's taken the form of a giant teddy bear, it's also an evil metal teddy bear that's piloted by unknown scavengers who are legend, known to numerous races as unstoppable monsters. And they start destructively strip mining the planet from orbit. The debris severely damages the Farragut, causing First Officer James T. Kirk to serve as acting captain. The Enterprise shows up to rescue them, and Spock, Chapel, Uhura, and Scotty, all future bridge officers on the main cast on the Enterprise, beam over to help. But soon the Enterprise is attacked and captured by the giant evil teddy bear, which warps out. Kirk teams up with his future officers to rescue Enterprise and to rescue the Farragut and the Enterprise, and it does not go well. Kirk learns lessons in leadership miraculously quickly, and they manage to get the disabled Farragut ahead of where the scavenger ship is going. And they then disconnect the Farragut saucer section from its warp nacelles, which they use to disable the scavenger. The Enterprise crew manages to escape from the scavenger, and then the Farragut uses photon torpedoes to blow the scavenger up. They detect 7,000 humans, yes, humans, in the scavenger wreckage, but they can't save any of them. Later, it's revealed that they were part of these humans were part of a pre-warp mission that launched from Earth between World War III and first contact with the Vulcans, and we're left with the uncomfortable question of how the best of humanity could have become such monsters. The end.
I have some jokes about that. We'll get to it, but we'll see. Father, what did you think of this one?
I thought it was a great episode. It's nice to see Kirk commanding several of the regulars from those old scientists. It's a bit hard to believe that the group of human descendants would travel around the galaxy and never make contact again with Earth or the Federation, but not impossible by any means. And space is obviously very vast. It's an interesting angle, an interesting thought at the end, yes, to see that these are humans, and as you say, descended from the best and the brightest, who had left Earth, in the mid 21st century, I guess.
Because that's what you always want in the aftermath of an ancient war: ship your best and your brightest off planet,
so that only the drunk scientist can develop the warp drive, right?
Jimmy, what'd you think of this one?
Well, I thought it was good. This was the first episode in all season that we have not had a romance plot involved in some way. There's no romance in this episode. And I've seen other commenters point that out. It's like, okay, that's something they've been looking for. We're getting back to regular Star Trek, which is not romance heavy. I thought that the episode was too rushed, though. It was about 50 minutes long, and it needed to be another 5 to 10 minutes longer, because there's this moment in the middle of it where Kirk is not doing well. I mean, Kirk's arc in this is he goes from not being a competent leader to being a competent leader, and they portray well him not being a competent leader. And then Spock has a brief conversation with him out of earshot of the others. And then all of a sudden everything is fixed and he's a perfect leader. And you have this scene where, he's trying to figure out what to do and he can't. And in the private conversation, he admits to Spock, "I'm frozen." which I thought was that's a good line. I'm just frozen. I'm paralyzed. I don't know what to do. And meanwhile, the future bridge officers or main cast, because Chapel's there, the future main cast is having a conversation about how do we depose this guy if he doesn't snap out of this. And then when Kirk and Spock come out, Kirk just instantly is doing all the right stuff, and every single one of the future officers has this immediate turnaround. It's, oh, good job, boss. Good job, boss. Good job, boss. And it's just very paint by numbers, and they needed to fill this out more. They needed another 5 to 10 minutes of Kirk fumbling and then gradually getting better to earn their approval. It shouldn't just all pivot on a dime the way it does in this episode. So I thought it was a good episode, but too short. And this section was too paint by numbers. He needed to grow more organically.
Yeah, they're trying to do something complex here, which is this is not the captain of the Enterprise yet. This is, we all know as fans that he's the future James D. Kirk legend. And so we've got to have Pike doing things. And then we're trying to build up Kirk as well at the same time. And so they're trying to do a lot in this one episode. And, it's not bad, but you're right. Like they just tried I think they tried to do too much here too quickly.
I did like getting the chance to see Kirk work with his future officers. I thought that was a good move. I like that. Yeah. I just thought that this one aspect of it, they needed to space out. It shouldn't be this quick. Also, we have comms down again, as Uhura tells us. So this is at least our third episode in a row where that happens.
Yeah.
Right. And with a unique solution, but we'll get to that. The other thing that was one of my overall thoughts about this is humans built a Death Star, which is essentially what this alien vessel is, because it destroys this planet, this first planet, at least in a massive destructive way. Maybe not completely blown into bits like Alderaan, but pretty bad.
They explain it as being a graviton beam, which is effectively, they also refer to it as a tractor beam that they were using to strip mine this planet. And apparently, even though they're not as fast as the Farragut and the Enterprise, they do have warp drive. So they developed or stole that after they left Earth.
Yeah. And when you talk about, built this Death Star type thing, either they built it or they stole it. Perhaps they commandeered it at some point in their travels or whatnot. But
it's a lot like V'ger, where the original ship is at the core, and a lot of this is built around. Again, they're reusing or recycling a concept from an earlier story, right? Where we have this V'ger like agglomeration around an original Earth spacecraft, which I thought was interesting. So Kirk is the first officer of the Farragut, with a Vulcan captain, which is interesting, who is risk averse, and he's so very bored because the captain won't take any risks. And yet he realizes
imagine Star Trek Enterprise with T'Pol in charge. Yeah,
right. Yeah. But later on, he acknowledges, if we had done what I wanted to do, I'd be dead right now, because I would have been on the planet's surface when this thing attacked. So, yeah, that's a good point. Enterprise comes to the rescue of the heavily damaged Farragut. So many Starfleet ships are getting beat up this season because it was Battel's ship in the first, and now Farragut.
At least they're putting months between the episodes to acknowledge repair time.
Right.
That's right. So when they beam aboard, Scotty references Scottish inventor
John Logie Baird. Yeah. How about that? The guy who invented television.
Yes. And which is also a kind of Doctor Who reference, because in a recent season of Doctor Who, they had a whole story that revolved around John Logie Baird, which is not the only Doctor Who Easter egg in this episode.
Right. There's also a TARDIS inside the scavenger ship.
Yeah. When we get a shot of the Enterprise all covered in the cable thingies, there's a tiny TARDIS in there, which I don't know how people see these things. Someone in the CGI team must have told someone, and that's the only way I can imagine. But it's fun. Clearly, Star Trek fans. Jimmy, wasn't there a reference in the 15th Doctor's Time with Ruby Sunday where he said we need to go to Star Trek to visit those people?
Yeah, and that's not the first Star Trek reference on Doctor Who. There have been others, and showrunner Russell T Davies and maybe even Stephen Moffat have alluded to the possibility of doing a crossover with Star Trek. But it seems like there's some willingness on the Star Trek side, too, at least on the part of the lower downs, the showrunner lower deckers, to, we'd be interested, too, and they put in these references.
That's nice. Yeah, I think the fourth Doctor showed up on the TNG Enterprise, right? In a comic book, I think.
In a comic, yeah.
Yeah. So just fun Doctor Who crossover. So La'an calls this big ship, Destroyer of Worlds, the Astrovore. So I thought we were going to get more from that, but we never get any more from her. Except for maybe, I guess it's lore from the Outer Rim, from the the outer reaches of this ancient scavenger ship prowling through space.
And I think number one was aware of it too, that Pike, being from Earth and a central planet, was not aware of it.
Okay.
This is like legends from the frontier of the Federation.
Okay. Yeah. The ship
which poses problems around. Like if they didn't have warp drive when they left Earth, how did they get out so far? But
right. Well,
yeah.
Same thing with Space Seed with Khan in the first place. So yeah, we have this giant maw. They built it in a sort of whatever this vessel is. It had a mouth, like it had a face. They built it with it where it looked like a creature of some sort.
And they made it look like a teddy bear. So who doesn't want to be devoured by a teddy bear? If you're going to have a destroyer of worlds, it may at least be a friendly devourer of worlds
with tentacles.
Yeah,
it's like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So Kirk pushes Scotty. He does the thing that Kirk will eventually be famous for in TOS, to push the Farragut beyond the safety limits, to go, just go beyond what you can do. And in TOS, Scotty always manages to do it, and it actually turns out okay. In this one, it breaks the ship. It doesn't actually do what he wants. The all of the warp manifolds, whatever those are destroyed, trashed, unusable. And this is the part where Kirk gets this crisis of confidence, and he gets his first time sitting in the captain's chair, although he would have sat in it as when he was taking the con from the captain before. So but they wanted to make it dramatic.
And they say that he's had command before. He's just never had it like this.
Yeah. Right. But when they're in,
I like the fact he didn't instantly leap in the chair, that he's got to kind of talk himself up to it.
Right. He does kind of, when they're all trying to give him ideas for what to do next, he kind of gets mad and says, I don't want all these chattering voices, too many options. What do I do? And that's what gives everyone else the pause. Like, is this guy capable of doing what needs to be done? It's Uhura who steps forward to defend him. He's still working on his command style. And they all decide that the person that needs to
he's not working on his command style. He's working on command.
Right.
Exactly.
As he admits, I'm frozen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So she sends Spock in, and so we have this nice moment. Kirk's with a 3D chessboard, which is going to be fun when because we know that's a thing between Kirk and Spock later on.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be a nice moment. I actually found it a distraction.
I guess.
I mean, you're in this crisis and you're building a 3D chessboard.
Yeah, I think he's sort of picking up the mess, I guess, to put things back. I think sort of physically doing what mentally is going through his mind, like picking up the pieces and trying to put things back in order. Maybe it's sort of a symbolic, I guess. But in any case, they talk about this thing like he talks about how he always felt like if he wanted to be the youngest captain ever, and he felt like if he could just be in command, he'd make all the right decisions. And now he's the dog who caught the car. Like with this old saying, when the dog chases the car, what's he going to do when he catches it? So he's caught the car. Now what does he do? And then Spock says, "Oh yeah, on Vulcan we have a saying, the Sehlat who ate its tail." And I'm like,
how does that fit? Yeah.
We give a title for the episode, but I'm not sure what that even is supposed to mean.
Yeah, I think they needed to think that one through a little bit further.
Yeah.
Maybe a Sehlat is a creature that normally like licks its tail or nibbles its tail or something, and then but if it ever eats its tail, then like there's no tail left to. I don't know. I'm just trying to.
Yeah. I suppose like when a dog chases its own tail, like what's he going to do when he catches his own tail? That sort of thing. Maybe that's the sort of thing it is. In any case, his advice to Kirk is basically keep following your intuition, your human intuition, which is, classic Spock. So meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, they're been sucked inside the alien vessel. This giant umbilical has been attached and is sucking all the energy out of the ship for some reason, somehow, instead of just tearing it to pieces and recycling it.
And this is just bizarre. The technobabble they use to explain what this thing is doing. They tell us that it's attracted to antiprotons. In fact, that's how they lure it later in the episode. Okay. But they also want to introduce baryon particles into their power flow to sour the milk. And it's like, okay, but antiprotons are baryons. An antiproton has 3 quarks, and a proton has 3 quarks, and a neutron has 3 quarks. So antiprotons and antineutrons and protons and neutrons are all baryons. A baryon is just a particle with an odd number of quarks in it. So anyway, it's sciencey.
Yeah, it's apparently similar to what we had in TNG, where LaForge soured the milk with baryon particles to get the thing to let go of the Enterprise. The Galaxy class Enterprise had fathered a child, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's another episode we'll talk about sometime. So
when you're older,
yeah, ask your mother. So. The as you mentioned, the comms are down, and they have to find another way to communicate. So what do? We go to Pelia's crazy hoarder quarters, where she apparently has telephones, plain old POTS telephones that somehow they hook up and make work.
And she's been holding onto these phones for 300 years, I guess. But,
yeah.
Yeah, she says this is like the first time I've been glad to have lived through the 1980s.
Yeah.
But you need you can't just connect them to each other and they work, right?
No, they have to have a telephone exchange. And in fact, later number 1 picks up one of them and we hear a dial tone, which means there's a telephone exchange connecting these. Because phones do not generate their own dial tones. There's apparently an unseen telephone exchange that they also install that we never see. I do like some of the lines that Pelia has in this subplot. At one point when they go into her quarters and she's turning on the lights and she says, as an old friend of mine once said, let there be light. And I'm not sure how we're supposed to take that because she's only 5,000 years old. And you could take that as she's referring to God as an old friend of hers, just as a joke. Or I'm not sure, maybe I should interpret that to mean like she knew Moses or Jesus. Back on Earth. Well, but Jesus didn't say, let there be light. Moses wrote Genesis, according to the traditional story. I don't think he really did, but that would be the traditional story. And then
if you meant God, like Jesus would have been, it was God. So yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
But then she says, she's really excited. She's explaining how we're going to wire up these telephones so we can communicate despite the fact comms are down. And one of them is this really regal, like, you'd see it in a period drama from early 20th century British royalty, But she's saying, I haven't had this much fun since I was a roadie for the dead. And Ortegas overhears this and says, your species can communicate with dead people? Because she's this magical alien who's lived for 5,000 years. Maybe she can talk to dead people.
Well, they're really grateful for it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So,
especially if you feed their hunger, so they're no longer hungry dead.
Yeah. So speaking of hunger, they determine that the aliens' weakness is their ravenous need to consume everything. So they decide they should make the Farragut into bait because they've warped ahead of it. They were trying to the alien is heading to this planet with hundreds of millions of people on it, pre-warp. There's no way to save them if they tear it apart. So they need to stop it. And so they're trying to get there, and then the Farragut breaks down halfway. They're ahead of it, and so they said, okay, we need to make them stop by turning us into bait for this ship, and then that's when I think they use the anti-proton thing to make it stop, and then they come up with the dropping the warp nacelles on it to explode and disable it, which seems kind of easy, given this the reputation of this ship is that it can be they can't it defeated a Klingon cruiser and all this other stuff,
and then they defeat it by firing photon torpedoes into its mouth, and it's like, Klingons never tried that before,
right?
Right. I mean, maybe the warp nacelles knocked out its shielding or something. I don't know. You can headcanon it, but yeah, it's a bit of a hole in the plot.
Still reminded me of the Death Star being destroyed by shooting something into that one vulnerable spot. So
yeah,
that's
right. At least it wasn't a port this big,
right?
It's no bigger than a womp rat. So, Jimmy, I know you love this one. Una uses a decompressing airlock to steer the ship.
Yeah,
I know you always love when we use decompressing airlocks as all that air flying out as a thruster. So yeah, that doesn't work that way.
At least they didn't have someone standing right at the front of the airlock or right at the back of the airlock who gets blown out despite the fact there's no air behind them.
Right, exactly. Because space sucks. And this is, once they've defeated this ship and all the Kirk actually, not Kirk, it's Pike actually defeats one of the invaders. Like, there's two invaders on board the Enterprise in suits. And he and La'an, they vaporize one and end up disabling the other or killing the other, but without him disintegrating.
And he had a moment where he could have killed Pike and didn't, and Pike wonders, why didn't he kill me? And they never answer that explicitly, but it's because he finally recognized a fellow human.
Right.
And he recognized Pike as a human and didn't want to kill him.
Right. And when he takes the mask off him, it's this guy with a mustache. And I'm like, Sam Kirk? Like, the guy looked a lot like the actor who plays Sam Kirk, and it was very confusing for just a second. And then I realized, no, it couldn't be.
I had wondered, once they made a big deal of these invaders, because they're stealing technology, and I wondered, could this be early Proto-Borg? And I know other people wondered the same thing, but no, it's just humans.
And it turns out that they were mid-21st century group of environmental scientists, so climate activists. I don't know what it is, but who built a ship to go to another world. And we were told 200 years ago they were the best of humanity had to offer, and somehow they became monsters. Hello, human nature. Like fallen human nature. In fact, it's a nice.
Actually, if they were environmental activists, given a lot of their plans for humanity, this isn't that unbelievable.
I was gonna go there. I didn't know whether I should, but thank you for going there, because that's what I thought the same thing. Like climate change activists, or environmental activists. I've seen how some of the things that they advocate. But in any case, it's also like, hey, human nature. The people can go bad. Just because, again, especially over generations, over time. Who knows what horrific things they endured as a community over the last 200 years. I mean, think of how different we are from 200 years ago as a society. So that idea of, you start with the best, the brightest or whatever. Frankly, I don't necessarily think that scientists are always going to be the best of humanity. There's a bit of scientific snobbery there. They
also built nuclear bombs and bioweapons and COVID gain of function upgrades and all kinds of things.
Right.
Well, I do want to give it to the writers of Strange New Worlds, though, for making for showing us that these apparent environmental activists could go bad.
Yeah.
Because that's contra to the Hollywood narrative of environmental activists are always good and they're the best of us. And the people who take all this stuff, with super seriousness, they're the high quality human people. And yet the writers of this show were still able to show them going bad. And so I want to give them credit for, taking, it would have been natural for them to do the opposite and for them to have a warning that even people Hollywood people would tend to regard as the best can go bad. That is to their credit. That's good. That's good writing.
Right.
One other thing, thinking about this group of supposedly best and the brightest who turned very evil along the way. Could it be part of the problem the fact that they didn't have any people with them who had disabilities or had any other need to be cared for, and so this is a group that doesn't have a chance, as it were, to exercise compassion and to care for people who need that sort of care. And makes them into scavengers as a result.
Interesting.
And all the people they'd encountered thus far were non-humans, and so that made it easier to objectify them and steal their stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
Except that doesn't quite work for like La'an and and Number One and stuff like that, because they Number One at least looks human. Another aspect, though, and this is just applying real world science to it, another thing that could explain the heel turn that this group experienced is just regression to the mean. Even if they were the best and the brightest when they left Earth, they started marrying and having kids. And when you have two superior people in whatever characteristic they're superior on, and they get married, their kid usually is not an improvement. It's usually a regression to the average or the mean. So like if you have two people who are 7 feet tall and they get married, it's not like their kid's going to be 7 foot tall or 8 feet tall. Their kid's likely to be 6 feet tall or less, because otherwise you could just marry tall people to each other and people would get taller and taller forever. And, you'd have 8-foot people, then 9-foot people, then 10-foot people, then 11-foot people, then 12-foot people. And that's not the way reproduction and inheritance works. If you have outlier cases where people are unusually tall or unusually smart or unusually any other characteristic, and they marry, their children are likely to be more average. And so that's regression to the mean. The same thing is why you can't just breed shortness into people until you get inch-high private eye. If you have two unusually short people get married, their kid's likely to be taller and more average.
Now, that's for intelligence, that regression to the mean we're talking about. But intelligence is not morality either. And that's a danger of equating, well, they were so intelligent, why weren't they more moral? Not always, not the same thing.
Well, their kids also probably weren't more intelligent than their parents. They were probably more average in intelligence than their parents.
Right. But morality would not be a genetic regression to the mean, but it could be a sort of societal regression because, in the situation they put themselves in. And Father, I think you're touching on it, without having other kinds of people to be compassionate toward, or to remind them of morality. Did they have philosophers? Did they have religious people? To remind them of morality and whether it's religious morality specifically or just morality in general. So that's an interesting aspect to consider. Kirk, meanwhile, speaking of seeing the humanity in others, he has a bit of a crisis of conscience about, why didn't I think of these adversaries as people until it was too late? When I knew that they were human, I suddenly have this compassion for them that I didn't have before. But that's a common thing. We are compassionate toward people we know and not people we don't know.
I think I understand Kirk's reaction there, and it's a human reaction to have. It's also a luxury. You have a luxury now that the battle is won to feel more sympathy for these people than you did when they were trying to kill you and everyone else. So I don't have any problem with Kirk not feeling compassion for the people that were trying to kill him and everybody else, and this planet full of pre-warp people that we can't save that is conveniently there to up the drama. But I do understand once you have luxury to indulge other emotions, I understand having those other emotions.
It's common even on, among, on Earth in our current day, World War II soldiers, American and German soldiers who on the battlefield were, if you pop up, I'm going to shoot you and kill you. And then after the battle, they sit down, years later can sit down and reconcile. And because now that it's not the heat of battle, we're not trying to kill each other, so it makes sense. I get why he's upset, but it also, Pike tells him, hey, they knew we were human before we knew they were human, and they were gonna kill us all. So he's kind of making the point you were making, Jimmy, which is it's the heat of battle. You have to work to survive and defend others. And then we do get the final at the end of the episode, the final "Good night, Captain Kirk," which was a nice little way to end it. A little Easter egg, a little feature glimpse at our future Star Trek. Very nice. Father, did you have any other notes on this one?
Just a couple little things. I love we talked earlier about the exchange between Kirk and Spock and what that does in terms of Kirk's leadership style. It's also just in many ways a great foreshadowing for the friendship that will develop between the two of them that we've talked about, other times as well. And then this planet that the scavenger ship was moving towards, Sullivan's planet. I feel like this is something we heard about in the original series, and I meant to look it up and just frankly forgot to. Do either of you remember or know anything about that?
Let me see. Oh, Jimmy and I are both doing it.
Okay.
It was only in this episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like other ones that we did have that are somebody's name possessive of planet.
Yeah.
It was there was another one. I know for certain from TOS actually. Excellent. Jimmy, any other notes?
Yeah, just a couple little things. One thing I noticed that must have driven the continuity people on this show mad was they decided to have Nurse Chapel, who's got that white uniform, as a nurse. They had apparently she was treating someone who was bleeding and she got blood on her uniform, and then, which is why you would have a white uniform, to make exposure to blood or other contaminants more obvious. You don't want your doctors dressing in black where you can't see when they've gotten a stain or something. Yes. But then the continuity people had to keep track of that for the rest of the episode because she's got that same patch of blood the rest of the episode. And so that's something I noticed and appreciated, even though it must have not been fun for the continuity people. Another thing that I liked is after the Enterprise has been eaten by the giant evil metal teddy bear and has the umbilical attached, they're sitting on the bridge and they're listening to these sounds that the ship is making, and they're like these groaning metallic sounds. And Mitchell, the navigator, says, "That's a good sound, right? The ship is happy screaming."
Yes. I wonder, so the character's Jenna Mitchell, and I wonder, is that any connection to Gary Mitchell?
I don't know.
Because I was thinking about Gary Mitchell in the context of if we do a spinoff of Strange New Worlds to a Kirk, Spock, Enterprise, prequel series or something, that would probably mean that, Gary Mitchell's the first officer before Spock becomes first officer. So we would likely start to see him at some point. It would be, or maybe he would just show up for that series. But I wonder what they intended to do with naming her Jenna Mitchell. It's just interesting.
I don't know. They could also infuse some Y chromosomes at some point.
Yeah, or gender swap the role. The character that's not unheard of. The the scavenger ship, by the way, that we see the original Earth ship is it's got the stars and bars, the 50-star American flag, and it has a hull number XCV 100. We see XCV in other ships. In the motion picture, we see a ring-shaped Enterprise, which in a painting on the recreation deck, the rec deck of the Enterprise, and it's XCV 330. So, and that's apparently the United Earth Space Probe Agency, the USPA,
USPA.
Which we heard about in TOS for the first time. So just a little Easter egg there. All right.
By the way, I would notice that all starship captains need to have poofy hair in this show, because when they introduced the Vulcan Captain Varel, she, like Captain Pike, also has poofy hair.
She does. It must be a grooming requirement. All right. So
it's
that
a rank insignia.
Yeah. Right. Before we wrap up, we do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Alexander V, Amanda F, Callie P, Jason T, and Teresa S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it for us this time. We'd love to know what you thought of the Sehlat who ate its tail. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And you can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should also leave a comment. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Strange New Worlds called What is Starfleet? Until then, Father Jason Tyler, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Tom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you. Live long and prosper. And I think I may sense a documentary coming on.
That's what I was thinking. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, the big decisions seem so simple when someone else has to live with the consequences. But the choices you make in that chair, they're yours to make. What comes after that is yours to live with.